And welcome back, fellow American patriots and Minutemen standing at the ready to fight anew for the issues that matter in America today here at CR Podcast at the Blaze. Your host, Daniel Horowitz, back here today for Tuesday, whether it's anarcho tyranny happening everywhere, an economic stagflation, a culture that is completely collapsing. There is never a dull moment here. So I need you guys to subscribe and like our page at Horowitz Show on YouTube. For those of you listening to iTunes, you could give us a 5-star rating there as well. And subscribe to our Substack, Liberating Truths, Daniel Horowitz at Substack. So I want to get to the economy today, but we've talked a lot about the price inflation, how it's impossible to afford living because we don't have a free market anywhere. We have the government that has essentially tipped the balance away from the consumer. So that same government has also tipped the balance of the labor market away from the employee, the job seeker, by creating this arbitrary monopoly for big corporations, the sucking sound that you hear of small businesses declining. And now we're at the point where you might hear headlines of 4.5% unemployment, maybe a little bit higher for younger people. But in most respects, there has never been a more bleak outlook for young Americans seeking jobs. Also, older Americans who are laid off, and increasingly, there's more of them. 30,000 new layoffs announced by UPS, other companies as well. What is happening here? Why is there no job future? And obviously, we could talk about a ton of issues, but if you have a Weimar Republic dynamic where individuals cannot afford the cost of living, but at the same time, especially if you're younger, you can't even find a job, even though it's hard to pay for the cost of living with a job. What you see in Minneapolis with the astroturfed organized insurrection, it's going to get worse. And it's not just going to be the crazies because people will have no hope. So this issue needs to be solved. Trump had a perfect opportunity to pitch to the younger generation an economy not built upon monopolistic asset bubbles created by fiscal and monetary policy that is anti-market. We could have restored the market, but instead, there's no job future. And by the way, the little we have in job creation is all going to India and being offshored. They onshored H-1Bs, onshored foreign workers. Then once they built them up here, now the companies just take it overseas, and that's it. So we're going to talk about that with Amanda Goodall coming up, our labor market guru here. But first, I just obviously have to offer a word here on Minneapolis and what's going on. And if we have time at the end of the interview, I'm going to come back to this. You're being gaslit by conning the fake Republican media that somehow this wasn't a retreat waving the white flag by Trump, because they're showing pictures of Governor Walz sending out the police and whatever other assets they have to throw tear gas at rioters. The reality is that they chased away the feds. So yeah, now they don't want rioters because the goal wasn't to continue rioting and allowing rioters to riot. The goal was to block immigration enforcement, and they succeeded. So yeah, now as part of the agreement, Walls was like, "Hey, okay, I'll show like I'm clamping down," because they got what they wanted. This is the equivalent of the Confederates at Fort Sumter attacking the Union base there and declaring rebellion, and then Lincoln having totally not responded. Imagine if Lincoln would have just sat there. It's like, all right, you could do this, because this is not just about Minneapolis. Make no mistake about it. This is going to happen in every blue state, and honestly, it's already happened for 12 months. You can't view this as Minneapolis in a vacuum. There has been an unrelenting insurrection everywhere in the country, thwarting ICE's operations. This is not just a matter of protesting. They're strategically designed to grind them to a halt. If the federal government cannot protect their own agents and seamlessly remove foreign invaders, then why do we even have a federal government? It's that simple. There is, in fact, nothing more emphatically within the federal control. And ironically, these same jerk-off judges that tell states they can't echo and supplement and complement federal immigration authorities because it is so much a federal issue you can't even help. But somehow, if you want to thwart it, you can do whatever you want and it's all fair game. Truly disgusting. But the point is, if Trump is not going to fight it executively, if he's going to listen to every judge, if he's not going to codify in Congress, like I've been saying, then I don't understand what the point of the presidency is. So this absolutely was another case of speaking loudly and then 3 minutes later surrendering with the white flag, carrying a white flag. So let's not be gaslit here because Walz is somehow using his police to go after rioters after they got what they wanted. This is not about Minneapolis. He was kicked out of LA. He was kicked out of Portland. And this is kicked out of Chicago. They're going to keep doing this. They're absolutely going to keep doing this. So they have given into a neo-Confederacy. Okay? And by the way, the Democrats are showing you what interposition actually looks like. They're showing you what it looks like when you have the local populace, the local officials, police, even National Guard in their case, the mayor, the governor, the majority in the legislature, the state and federal judges. You would think federal might be different, but no. Everything is homegrown. And when they're all on the same page, they'll fight the feds. And this is what we wanted to do to protect American liberties. I want you to understand. If Democrats are able to completely thwart the feds as it relates to protecting illegal alien rights that aren't really rights, of course, how much more so we should have red states that are willing to protect us from tyranny against American civil liberties. But we don't have that because we have a bunch of lemmings as Republicans. But I'm just telling you, they are teaching you what state sovereignty is. And we unfortunately never use it. But this is what I mean. This is the bitter pill. Like, there's one thing if red states are assisting with deportations and deporting themselves and doing all sorts of things, but we're like, no, Plilo Rideau, you have to educate them. You have to do this. You have to, you can't enforce it. You can't criminalize illegal immigration at a state level. So then you get the lowest common denominator where the blue states are able to thwart it, but the red states can't even enforce it. So it's pathetic. What's the point of having elections then? Heads they win, tails they win. But again, this is extremely weak. Talk loudly about an issue, telegraph your punches, sound like a buffoon, make it all about yourself. You sound narcissistic, sound stupid, turn off the normie voters, and then you don't even follow through with anything. That's how you make an issue unpopular. But I don't want to beat a dead horse with that. If we have time, I want to get back to this issue because there's another important angle that I want to follow up on interposition here, what we can learn from Minneapolis. If we don't want to fight them, how do we at least mimic their behavior when we have a Democrat president? But I do want to get back to the economy with our guest. So, folks, most of us who are maybe closer to middle age, where, yeah, we do kind of have a job, we think we're making enough money, but we're struggling, trying to figure out how do we support our kids? How do we support our family with the cost of living the way it is? We've never seen a cost of living crisis because we've never seen such a government spending debt crisis that induced this. But that's only half the story. That's assuming you have a job. We have never seen a job market as bad as it is while we have an affordability crisis, particularly for younger people. Now, the data is starting to show higher unemployment among younger people, but it doesn't fully capture this labor arbitrage disaster that we're seeing, where the numbers are hidden, but you might have a son or a daughter that just graduated, did very well, 4.0 GPA, uh, skilled, did everything right, and you just can't land a job. And it's not AI. I mean, I've been the biggest opponent of AGI, generative AI, the data center stuff, and I think there's a lot of other harms, and jobs might be an issue in the future, but that's not what's happening, because this bleed in corporate America has been happening before that. And also, if we have all this amazing GDP growth from all these tech companies, if AI were truly doing what people think it's doing, then like every other technology, there's creative destruction. Some jobs are destroyed, but on net, that makes things more efficient, more productive. And you know what happens? Then you have other jobs that are created, but we're not seeing that. We are seeing in almost every field, jobs are in the toilet. There's no net job creation. In fact, the latest ADP report showed for December something like 48,000, which, you really need about 150,000 just for population growth. But then you peek into the numbers, it's all healthcare, all healthcare. So a sick, dying population that was, poisoned the last generation with all sorts of things. So there's always going to be jobs in that. But manufacturing, construction, that's been in a recession for several years. Tech, which should be booming, the entire economy is tech. But then why are there no jobs in tech? So with us to unsort this, untangle this enigma and the offshoring that is taking place, that sucking sound of jobs going to India, is the job chick who follows everything labor market. We like checking in with Amanda Goodall every few months. And now there's really a lot going on. First off, you got to check out the job chick on Twitter and the same name Substack. Very high quality work there. So make sure to subscribe. And she's with us today. Amanda, welcome back to the Blaze. Good to see you.
Yeah, thanks, Daniel. I'm always ready to talk this stuff anytime. Yeah, I wanted to bring up really quickly. You mentioned how tech did not really show up in the ADP report, which is just insane. And especially because the entire market is built on tech right now. And to me, this is what I've been talking about a lot. So I'm really looking forward to kind of diving into this a little bit, because they're lying. Companies are lying. Let's just put it like flat and exactly how it is.
Yeah, it's not AI. Again, I have a lot of other issues with it. But it's funny, unlike others that think, oh my gosh, AI is taking everything. I'm like, it kind of sucks and it's kind of overrated, at least where the technology is now. And we're seeing it with about 5-6 reports that have come out about businesses really failing to generate more productivity, more revenue from it. Because I'm a strong believer in the free market. I'm a strong believer that if you have more productivity, that on net, it's going to create other jobs. So if this stuff is booming, all the investments, well, the circle jerk finance investments, maybe therein lies the answer. Where are the jobs?
Exactly. And and I think it's quite interesting. I think that, and you sent me the ADP thing this morning. I have not had a chance to really go through it, but I noticed tech was on there, and I believe it was like 1,000 jobs added. Really? And wait a minute. Okay, so let's just look outside of tech at this point. Okay, so yes, there's some, home building is slow, right? But all these data centers are happening, and there's been 1,000 increase in construction. That's it. What's going on? Like, nothing makes sense at all. It doesn't matter whether it's government data, whether it comes from ADP. Nothing makes sense until you really get into the weeds and you go into each company and look at exactly who they're hiring, where those people came from, and what the jobs actually are. And that's why, it just blows my mind to see what is going on with the outsourcing, the offshoring, that I know we're going to really dive into with all of this. But it is a lot of smoke and mirrors going on right now.
So there's a couple things. So first of all, there's this stuff that I think is blatantly due to recession. It's just that like the freight recession. UPS announced that they're cutting, in addition to tens of thousands of jobs they already cut, another 30,000 planned, according to their CFO. That I'm assuming is straight up. I mean, freight's in the toilet.
Yes, definitely. They're having a moment, and they've been having a moment for the last year. So yes, definitely. And I did do a piece a while ago on UPS. I think it was like back in the last summer, where I kind of broke down the differences between what's going on between UPS, FedEx, etc. And they're changing their models somewhat. So this change and these layoffs that are happening is a bit of a pivot for the company. Honestly, I think it's a crapshoot on what's going on. I think they're hoping this is going to work. It's very software. It's very automated. We see a lot of hires in that. And when you see all these drivers getting laid off and different people from the warehouses and things like that, you can actually see this pivot going on behind the scenes. They haven't said as much, but there are big changes coming for UPS. FedEx is still on a track. I think they're still laying off and stuff like that, but they are still on the same track. UPS is doing some interesting things.
So, what is the labor arbitrage disaster you talk about that explains why the numbers don't reflect reality? In that, for many people seeking a job, their first job in their 20s, it appears like it's a harder market than during the GFC.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What's behind that?
How long have you got? The end of the day, we've seen AI being used as a scapegoat for all these layoffs for like all of 25. Okay, let's say, and 24 was about restructuring, and in 23 they were talking about laying off due to the overhiring that happened after COVID. Right now, where we are sitting right now, number one, let's not believe the AI law, information that they're giving out. This is not the situation. This is not the rule of thumb of what's happening. Overall, when you look at companies from the Fortune 100 on down to the smallest, the companies right now are focusing on outsourcing and offshoring. And this is simply due to labor constraint, saving margins, making margins greater, and producing these incredible, stocks that are just popping like mad. And, when you go back and you look at the history of all of this, and I do this kind of stuff because I'm a complete nerd with all of this, you can really see the changes going from GFC to today. 2010s, all of the offshoring really started ramping up, and they were like, wait a minute, we can do this. We had all the problems after GFC with the layoffs and things like that. They changed how HR was focused and how it ran and how they hired. Moving on to today, they're just like, wait a minute, this is easier. And at no point does it make sense for a large company, especially, to bring jobs back to the US because it's cheaper and it's easier to manage it abroad. Whether they're in India, China, Mexico, it doesn't matter where you are. It's still cheaper and it's still easier because there's not a lot of regulation, and it just makes sense. This is why they keep doing this. So the labor arbitrage that we are seeing is simply companies going, yeah, I don't want to hire this, because it's not because people aren't necessarily talented. It's not because they can't find the right people. It just makes more financial sense. And this is going to keep moving as we go further down the line into 2030. This is not going to come back to where we remember jobs being.
So you're basically saying anyone who has a job now, they might have trouble, with upward mobility, but they have a job. But if you're trying to enter the marketplace, well, here's what you're facing. Tech job postings, you write, are down 36% below pre-COVID levels. But in India, they're up 47%. And again, we're saying that there's this big AI boom here, that they're trying to say is decreasing jobs, but it makes no sense, because if it's a real boom, it should be creating a lot of other jobs in some sort of subsector. But then you find also like Citibank, where you have 802 job postings in the US, 554 in India. That's almost that parity. Where does it come from? Are these just call centers, or are they a lot deeper than just the typical person who answers the phone when you have a complaint?
Yeah, it started as that. And we all complained about it. And we're like, oh, I need to hang up the call and go, give me to your manager, right? Well, the managers are still now in India and every other country. So, this is every job these days, whether it's tech, whether it's customer service, whether it's anything doing, training AI, whatever it is, jobs are going up. We are seeing, HR roles, and any kind of administrative financial roles being offshored as well right now because it's easier to onboard and to do that administration, payroll, benefits, whatever abroad. It's a lot cheaper and it just makes more sense. And with so many, applications out there, all the automation that's going on, especially in anything administrative, again, why should they hire Americans at this point? Because it makes more financial sense for the companies. And this is the situation we are dealing with. So it is across the board. It's not just call centers anymore.
Yeah, and it seems like it's across the board financial services. It's obviously tech, even healthcare to a large extent, depending on the type of job it is. So what I'm not understanding is, how did this begin? Was this largely because we imported a lot of the foreign workers here, and then once it reaches a critical mass, they're like, you know what, let's take that entire division and transplant it back to where they came from?
So I have my theories, and I'm actually doing some research on that because I do think there are some large tech companies, let's just put it that way, that have done that. We do see the different, H-1B situations, whether they're coming over OPT, going to college, going to an F1 visa, and then going into the H-1B visa program. Some companies I'm looking at, and I'm not going to name them yet, just because I haven't fully decided where I'm sitting on this. I'm still doing the research, but you've heard of them all. Let's put it that way. They are some of the largest chip companies in the world, specifically. But you're seeing this situation where, okay, all companies are using H-1B, right? But well, not all, but a lot of companies are using H-1B. And some of the larger tech companies use them for a lot shorter time period than you would imagine. And the next place that you see big hires from these companies are abroad, back over to China, back over to India, things like that. So there's this something that I'm looking at, and I'm waiting for the laser to show up on my face, the little red laser, to go, how did you figure this out? But there's this clump of hiring that goes on. And when you look at this, and you have to go global on all of this, and you can really see H-1Bs just stop. I mean, yes, the companies are still bringing in new ones, but they stop. And all of a sudden there's mass hiring in these other companies that are very associated to these tech companies. So there's something going on. But, again, how this all started was simply just a matter of, how do we game the system? And there is a lot of, subsidies and programs and things like that. There's so many ways to game the system. And I think the smart companies just went, I got this.
So, how did the equilibrium between employer and job seeker break down? Typically, people are desperate for jobs, but businesses are desperate for workers, and you reach some sort of happy medium. Whereas now it's like it's impossible to find. If you do, you're expendable. Just the whole corporate culture, everything from the experience, the HR experience, is degenerating every year. It's getting worse. You're treated like chattel. But how could that be? Is it all because we're a limited pool in America, but they have this bigger supply? Is it all because of offshoring? Is it because small businesses have declined and now the companies are bigger and they have bigger monopolies? What is it? Why is the market breaking down? I feel like we've never seen this. Other than when you're in a recession. So then there's a shortage of those jobs as they suffer revenue decline, which is temporary. But this is like a systemic change. Why?
This really does stem back to the GFC, and it's right there in the name, the crisis. When everything kind of broke down, the boards that were in place at that time, namely with the bigger companies, they were scared. They didn't ever want that situation to happen again. So they implemented a lot of new things. HR became weaponized, and more automated on the process. So the whole thing from, let's say, 2011 to now has changed. Jobs, the way we used to get hired for jobs completely changed. And this really just comes down to the boards not ever wanting this to happen again, not wanting to be that vulnerable. So people became very expendable. It used to be loyalty, and things changed. And you follow this on throughout the years, and you can probably take it in like 5-10 year chunks on how you can actually see this changing from the roles of CHRO coming in, the business partner, things like that, how everything is changing. And now it's all about protecting the company and moving forward. So the entire process for a job seeker now, it's just trash. It is complete trash because HR is not there as the same function it used to be. And, so from everything from the process of applying to a job to the interviews that are, 6, 7, 8 rounds of interviews, which is insane. This is what we're seeing right now. And even the onboarding process could be done by somebody offshored. It's just odd the way everything has changed. But again, this is board governance. This is companies going, no, this makes more financial sense. And, we have constantly seen this change in hiring and the push with how HR is running the show with everything. And they're not hiring specifically, but it's how everything is kind of going on in the company and their focus moving forward. But the whole situation that we are seeing right now is tragic. It's awful. I'm not seeing anything change. And the last couple of years, I think so many more people have become hyper aware of it. And I don't know if it's just media, because media stuff is just, take it with a grain of sand, right? But it is a case of looking and going through the history and going, this is where it broke. And I will blame AI a lot of this, and I think COVID was just this great catalyst to move us forward in automation and AI, and companies have clung to that. But even still, with the automation that is in today, it has revolutionized how things actually happen in hiring.
You're saying, to be clear, you're not saying the thesis, because we rejected it before, that AI is making more productivity, so obviating the need for a job. You're talking about employing the use of AI automation in job searches, that it passes over people. Like I had this just this week or last week, I had one of my shows flagged for copyright. What was copyright? Because I played a congressional candidate's political ad mimicking Trump's YMCA dance. So it clued in on YMCA copyright. I mean, and that's the thing. It's like, it's a technology, but it has major flaws, and everyone knows that. So you're saying it's overlooking it. But Amanda, my question to you is, typically, historically, if one company was employing crappy means of recruiting and retaining and making the talent happy, someone else would come along and be like, well, we have a better process and we're going to attract those people. Why is that market mechanism breaking down? Of why is there no choice in competition in seeking talent the same way there was in the past?
I think that's twofold, and I think it's lazy hiring. Bringing in the AI, which this is. AI is not taking over the jobs. There is automation, yes. There and a lot of warehouses and things like that. Yes, we're seeing that greatly. Amazon, especially, Walmart upcoming. But the overall AI situation that I am talking about, like you rightly pointed out, it is about this lazy hiring and this hiring process overall. People are using AI to write resumes. They aren't reading them. It's sloppy. It doesn't actually match who they are. Recruiters are not aware of the actual jobs. It gets passed down. It's almost like, playing telephone, when you have to go through and see what somebody says at the end, because the hiring managers, the leaders that are needing the new people in, they're like this and this and this and this, and they may not even know exactly all the skills or what the background they need for the people. So you have lazy applying, you have lazy recruitment, you have lazy HR, and and a lot of it is all AI. It's AI versus AI. And this is the situation that we are at. And it is the case. And I've been saying this for years. As soon as like chat really came out, to everybody, I was just like, and everybody was like, oh, it's because you help people with jobs, so that's why you hate it. You want to make money helping them with jobs and finding them. I'm like, no, this is just insanity.
In other words,
And
more than mechanizing or streamlining, let's say, a certain production process. Here we're dealing with the most human element of it, and yet you're taking the humanity out of it. So, the seekers turn themselves into an AI bot by crafting their resume with AI, and then the HR teams are employing AI to go and seek it, and you just have no human element. So that's how you're getting people that would be talented people not finding jobs, even before we discuss the offshoring and outsourcing and things like that. So that's like an independent problem within this sphere. I find that truly amazing that it's not so much AI taking away the jobs, but the employment of it in the job search that's really screwing with people. With that, I want to get to your thesis here that you've teased out. You got like several million views on this, and those of you watching, I want to read this. You put out on Twitter a couple weeks ago, HR is the only department that gets a free pass for being completely useless. They produce zero revenue, kill morale with endless policies, protect the company, not you, and somehow still get invited to every meeting like they're essential. Remove 90% of HR tomorrow, and the business would run smoother, faster, and happier. Again, if that's true, Amanda, why aren't we seeing people do this, companies do this, or is AI going to do that?
I think they're trying, and I think it kind of really started heavily with, IBM, their Watson X Orchestrate, which is helping to automate hiring. And, I have a love-hate relationship with AI because right now it's not where we need it to be. And so to use it for hiring, again, you're taking out that human element, but we also have HR and recruiters that are highly untrained and unqualified to do what companies are needing, because the scope of jobs is changing so rapidly. If you don't understand what's going on the last 20, 30 years, you're not going to be good at what you do. But and I think this is interesting because, I posted that and I have to say, I posted this actually after just like a little scuffle I had with one team I was working with. And I was just like, oh my gosh, I can't stand what is going on in HR. And, my pet hate for HR is no secret to anybody that follows me, but when you look at the best companies that have their HR hiring teams and their hiring practices, NVIDIA, Costco, SpaceX, even though it's hard and it's very demanding there, you see these teams that don't have massive churn. They don't have all these major lawsuits, because I hear the conversation from so many people, and especially off of that post, it got into it on that post for sure. But they were like, oh no, that's exactly why HR is there. They're not there to make money. They're there to save the company's money in all these lawsuits. I'm like, you know what? The fact is, the only reason that you guys are getting all of these lawsuits is bad hiring practices, because you just don't know what you're doing. And, when you look at the best companies, there's no drama. I mean, yeah, there's some, of course, but it's not the same. And it's not the same situation. Very different, tier of talent managing these companies, and you can see it clearly. So overall, just what's gone on over the years is insane. If you can't, bring in the right talent so that adults can be accountable, what are you doing with HR? And, so yes, that was my whole very spicy post of, I can't stand them. And, I do think, if you get rid of 90% of it, and so much is getting automated, which is fine once it starts working, nobody likes dealing with HR. Everything changed. And this all goes back to the GFC time period when everything changed. And since then, this is where we are today with hiring and jobs. And, maybe there's a point where automation will make it better for the job seeker, but I don't think it's going to change how companies hire, and it's certainly not going to
You're
change
saying
jobs being available.
things were better when, let's say, I'm a mechanical engineer
Mhm.
and I'm a manager and I'm looking for an engineer. I myself would have been involved in that hiring process rather than a random HR team that knows nothing about engineering.
Mhm. Absolutely. Absolutely. And again, you can take that back, 120 plus years. How'd you used to get a job? You went and talked to the people that worked there. Whether it was the owner, whether it was one of the directors or the team, and they're like, "Oh yeah, we do need somebody here. Cool. Yeah, let's do this." Life's changed. Now they're just like, "Well, we need to think about this." And and I posted something, and it was something I just saw on Reddit the other day, and I just posted it last night or this morning. I can't remember when I posted it. About somebody got disqualified because they had a master's degree and they were looking for a bachelor's degree. This is AI automation of what we're
That's
dealing with right
classic.
now. It's insane.
This
And
Amelia Bedelia. That's the thing I got when I got flagged. It like something tickles its algorithm and it just runs with it. And it's like,
Mhm.
look, it has its use, but you can't completely rely on it like we are. It's just utterly ridiculous. So anyway, I want to get back to where young workers are headed because this is a big problem. This is like Weimar Republic style problems. This would be a problem if the cost of living were what it was last decade. But of course, many items have doubled, others have gone up 40, 50%. And then you can't land your first job. So 35% of entry level postings on LinkedIn now require at least 3 years of experience, according to Forbes.
Mhm.
How did this happen, and why is it that an entry level job now requires non entry level qualifications?
How did this happen? Bad HR. No, no, but overall, I don't know what broke with that, and I'm not a big fan of what the universities have churned out the last couple of years. I think it's a complete disservice to our young people. I myself have several, young 20s, kids, and they've gone through it, and it's frustrating to watch it happen because you look at the scope of where jobs are going, and universities are still, 50 years ago. They're still doing that same level of education. I think we're seeing it across the board from kindergarten on up, but I digress. The situation that's happening with young adults these days and this entry level shenanigans, we're not seeing actual entry level jobs anymore. And there's internships and they work, and there's still those summer internship style roles, and a lot of getting paid for, which is great. But after that, you don't have 3 years of experience, and these companies are looking for this. But this is also something that we are seeing greatly, especially in tech, especially in finance, and a couple other areas where they are, all these layoffs that we are having are getting rid of generalists, which are just your average, I can do a lot of different things and I'm going to slot into this role type of worker. And companies are getting rid of them or reorging them to create a specialist. And we're seeing that in the Amazon layoffs that are happening right now, how they're rehiring. But you're seeing this everywhere, and I think XAI made a really great example of that, in 2025 when they did their layoffs. With that, it was just, overnight basically. And they're like, yeah, no, we're looking for specialists now. And within, a little over 24 hours, people were out of a job. And this is the situation we are starting to see. And it's funny because I think they were one of the companies that first started really using that word specialist like that, especially around layoffs. And we're seeing this more. So how can a young adult become a specialist instantly? It's not possible. So this is part of that whole concept where companies are actually building out these jobs, and now they can't hire, they can't find the right people, so it makes it easier to outsource and offshore. You see what's
You're
going on
saying,
here?
but they have all these specialists in India?
They have a lot of specialists in the US and other, countries, and not specifically China and India. They're not hiring for specialist roles. You're not seeing that as much. You can still have higher level roles, don't get me wrong, but we are seeing a difference on where they are located. All of these entry level roles that our young adults should be getting are the ones being offshored because they can't find talent. Well, you can't find talent entry level with 3 years experience because it doesn't exist. fast. So, it's one of those like things that are just starting to happen. I think, in a few months from now, I think people are starting to get angry about this enough that I think this is going to start being addressed as well, more and more. Like we're now seeing everybody kind of, get behind what's going on with H-1Bs. I think people are starting to realize offshoring is actually the bigger problem here.
So what do we do about that? What do we fix at the governmental level? H-1B is very easy because that's an immigration policy, which is all governmental, and you could shut that off. But how do we fix this problem where there's no jobs for young people?
That's the question of the year, I think. But I think what we have to do is change what companies are doing. And, I'm not big on, mandates for companies. I don't think the government should run how companies are, work and what they do. But something has to give. So number one, I think the first politician that actually tackles this head on is going to just win over the American public in a second. But
don't we need to get to the source of why they are outsourcing? I mean,
yeah.
So again, some of this I would argue we sowed with immigration policy by bringing it all here unnaturally in such large numbers.
Mm-hmm.
So then that seamlessly created a pipeline, a cultural pipeline, a corporate pipeline to bring them back to India. But clearly there are a lot of disincentives to do work in America relative to elsewhere. Now, we don't want to, get rid of child labor laws like that are really, draconian or, some crazy things they do there. But at the same time, I think obviously we got to address that. Do you have any tips? Oh, I'm sorry. Do you want to say anything on that?
No, I was just going to say, a lot of people talk about the subsidies, and that might be something. I know we put in the 100K fee for H-1Bs, which is peanuts for these companies. But if you remove subsidies and you make it a lot harder for companies, that's another method that will make them go, maybe we do have to come back home and provide the right work to the right talent at the end of the day. So tips. Yes. What was your question on tips?
For youngsters? Yeah. I mean, that are, people that have kids that graduated college, or they're young, or they're in high school. A, what sort of fields to go into now, and B, best practices of setting yourself up to secure that first job that's so scarce now.
Yeah, know that it's going to be hard. Know that it's going to be tough because you have everybody looking for these jobs. And the fact that these entry-level jobs now require experience, you are dealing with not just other, young adults. You're dealing with everybody across the board that is clamoring for a job right now. So number one, make that realization that this is going to be difficult. And number two, your best method overall to really start to find the right job is your network. And I can't stress that enough. And I don't mean reach out to every recruiter on LinkedIn. That's not a process. Go to the companies, go to events, go to conferences where these companies are, start talking to the people. They are there for you to talk to. You can go into panels, go speak to them. They are happy to talk to you. You can get in a lot of ways. Really use any kind of resources that you have, instead of, relying on job boards, because, AI is not where it's at right now. And people are getting, screened out so quickly.
Just blindly and coldly submitting that resume online ain't going to get you where you need to go.
Yeah. You really want to talk to the right people and just keep pushing until something happens, and keep following up, and don't make it, don't be generic in what you're doing. Build those relationships. Okay. That's what networking needs to be. It's not just, well, I've reached out to this many recruiters and I didn't hear back from them, because they're not going to respond if you just drop them your resume or drop them a generic message, but building those relationships. And that's something you have to do your entire career. And as soon as you find a job, keep looking for another one, because I would rather and this goes for anybody, don't let it be a situation where you get laid off. Let it be a situation where you're like, hi, I need 2 weeks notice. Here you go. And you guys part ways right. You have to look out for yourselves constantly. And young adults really need to understand that is the situation that we are in today. It's not what our parents did, and everything has changed overall. But how we have to go about hiring, just forget job boards. Just forget job boards. It's useless.
Yeah, and they don't have loyalty to you. So, I mean, you got to reciprocate it. You got to look out for yourself.
Yep.
This is certainly very sobering, but
Mm,
with the corporate culture the way it is, the monopolies and the outsourcing, it is really, really tough. And then you throw on the affordability crisis. Please don't
mhm,
gaslight us that we have a great economy here. So much more to delve into, so little time.
mhm.
At the job chick on Twitter, and then same name on Substack.
Yes, yes, you can find me right there.
Yes, absolutely. Very high quality work. Definitely, this is going to be a wild, wild year. So you're going to want to keep glued to her Twitter. Amanda, thanks so much for what you do, and thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Daniel. Anytime.
Take care. So, folks, I just wanted to say that look, this is what happens when you don't have capital formation flowing to where it needs to go. Okay. I would argue that the antecedent to all of this is the debt and the venture socialism and government through fiscal and monetary policy shoving money to where it doesn't belong, and where it ought not to go. That creates monopolies. What happens when you have a monopoly? So if it's not natural, A, you have an advantage over the consumer, and B, of it, an advantage over the job seeker, and it's those fields that are at the top of that K shaped economy that won out from the previous round of bailouts and monetary manipulation and government debt. They now have market share that they don't need to deal with job seekers. They don't need to please employees. They don't need to please consumers. And they could essentially do whatever they want, and it ought not be that way. But I think at a minimum, what you cannot tell us is that somehow, oh, the economy is amazing. Look at this AI. Because again, if it were creating, well, what do they say, 4 or 5% GDP, the jobs would have to be there. You could say these jobs are cut, but then other jobs, or even if you would tell me, oh, entry level jobs are gone, but oh my gosh, mid level, upper level, no jobs are there. The reality is that if you look at every jobs report, it's government and healthcare, and that's it. Maybe a little bit defense, depending on the defense industry. So anyway, that is for our main subject today. I just want to get back to. I see we have a little bit more time. The Minnesota stuff. What I am learning from the Democrats is they are showing you what blue state nullification, interposition, heck, a neo-confederacy looks like. Madison talked about this in Federalist 46, about what happens if there's federal government overreach, or in the opinion of the locals, there is federal overreach. And he talks about the ingredients. And as I read Federalist 46, I want you guys to be thinking about how the Democrats are literally applying every aspect of this. So the disquietude of the people, their repugnance and perhaps refusal to cooperate with the officers of the Union, the frowns of the executive magistracy of the state, the embarrassments created by legislative devices, which would often be added on such occasions, would oppose in any state, difficulties not to be despised, would form in large states very serious impediments, and where the sentiments of several adjoining states happen to be in unison, would present obstructions which the federal government could hardly be willing to encounter. Ambitious encroachments of the federal government on the authority of state governments would not excite the opposition of a single state or of a few states only. They would be signals of general alarm. And notice what they talk about. It starts with the people protesting and the local officials, the governor, the state judges, the federal judges. And that's what you got to marvel at the left. In a blue state, the federal judges will side with the state over the feds. And they have all the ingredients. The Justice Department has withdrawn its request for arrest warrants against Don Lemon for storming a church in St. Paul after a federal judge declined to sign the warrant. Federal judge was like, screw it. So now they caved on that. This guy, Judge Schlitz, chief federal judge in Minnesota, ordered the head of ICE, Todd Lyons, to appear personally in front of him. He said the court's patience is at an end. Let's see if he obsequiously goes and walks right in front of him. But you see what I mean? Look at the energy that the left employs in fighting for illegals. We didn't have any of this in red states when, DOJ, the FBI, they were coming to arrest people that did nothing on that day in January 6th. And then they also have people willing to do what it takes, forming militias and forming them, by the way, together with their elected officials, not against their elected officials, but together. They're all on the same side. There's a story, a rioter lost a finger throwing explosives at ICE. And I was watching that and thinking, these guys are willing to end their life because part of their strategy is to create such a volatile environment where ICE is constantly on edge, and they're forced to shoot at people and capture some of them on camera that aren't good shoots. I think we all understand that the second shooting was not a clean shooting. Okay, I'll admit that, and I'll say that at the same time, it was stupid what the federal government said that it was because he was carrying a gun. I'm not going to defend that. But at the same time, I'm not going to lambast those ICE agents because they've constantly been under attack. So what they're doing is they're throwing people at them in a way that creates chaos. And inevitably, you're going to have a bloody shirt moment. And then that's going to build upon the disquietude, the unpopular nature of it, tank the mission. So in order to do that, you have to have people willing to risk their lives. Clearly, they have, just like the Islamists, an unlimited supply of these people. And then, of course, you had the story from yesterday where Antifa is running a shadow police force targeting ICE, and they have this group chat that had the lieutenant governor and Democrat state legislators on it. That's what interposition looks like. I remember under Biden, everyone was like, well, what do you want, Daniel? What could a state do? The feds are going to come in. Well, they're showing you what to do. Now, I'm not defending Trump backing down, but I'm saying if he is going to back down, could we at least, I don't mind if the federal government is done. Blue states do what they want. Okay, then could red states do what they want? But this is the problem. It's heads they win, tails we lose. That red states are not pushing back against federal tyranny when Democrats are in control. Red states are not enforcing immigration law, not just when Democrats are in control, but even under Trump, because of the judicial tyranny that's one-sided that we refuse to ignore, or at least fight in Congress. So we're left with the lowest common denominator of state sovereignty and state interposition, where basically blue states have a one-directional national divorce, but red states are still married to the old system. Well, something's got to give. Either we're a federal republic or we're dissolving it into the states. But what we can have is state sovereignty on steroids for blue states and federal tyranny for red states. And folks, that's about it for today. We're going to follow this and monitor closely. Make sure you subscribe at Horowitz Show on YouTube. Till tomorrow, God bless you all, and thank you for listening.